Hi, my name's Bethany and welcome to Woolly Meadows Felting. Today I'm going to show you how to make a wet felted painting. I made this tea cozy of orcas and thought how lovely it was, so thought I would make it into a larger piece. I'm going to show you a few things that come in our kits. We always include a sheet of merino silk pre-felt. I find it just has the perfect texture for wet felted paintings. I like it because it's lightweight, has a beautiful drape to it, and the fine texture means that it binds with the wool on top. If not, if you use a coarser pre-felt, it actually migrates through the painting and you get more fuzzies. It's also a nice lightweight backing if you want to put it into a frame. It's always nice to have a bit of a shadow box effect with frames. So that the light can come onto the wool and there's a bit of distance between the fabric and the glass or plexi. In our kits we also have a variety of wool. I like to use wool and some plant-based fibers as well. As you can see, we have a range of somewhere between 16 to 22 colors usually. And those are often Corriedale, Merino, Shetland, any of those kinds of wool, and then of course the plant-based fibers and wool locks. So in our kits we always include a larger sheet than is needed, and for a 16 by 20 piece you just want to use an extra 2 inches on both sides, so it would be an 18 by 22. And you can just mark it with a regular pencil and ruler and then cut it to size. So to begin, it's a good idea to lay a piece of plastic over your workspace, unless you have a plastic table, which is handy, just because it is quite wet, wet felting. And then so just lay your pre-felt down, and then what I'm going to do is actually pluck the surface just to raise the fibers of the pre-felt slightly. You're just going to use just to pull at the fiber. And that helps the wool bind to the back of the fabric. So you're just going to pull it, and you want to especially remember to do the edges. Just going to pull at it. Some people like to use like a dog brush or something to speed up this process, but it doesn't take too long. You're just going to pluck the entire surface. And once we've done all of that, we are ready to start felting. Well, actually laying out our felted painting, I should say. I like to start with the horizon line. So I'm going to take actually my mid-tone, my darkest color. Mid is in halfway in my section of laid out once it's actually one of the darker tones in the painting. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to pull the fiber out so it's nice and thin. This is wool top, so you can see all of the wool has been carded in the same direction. And I'm just going to pull it and lay it out. I would like to overlap the edge of the painting by about an inch. And I like to cause a bit of a bend in the design, so my horizon isn't perfectly straight. As you see on the tea cozy, I like to have it ripple, just bands of color. And I find as I'm wet felting, a lot of times it moves just a little bit, so you can kind of exaggerate it a little bit. And in the kits, you might not need all of the fiber, that's sent, so just keep that in mind. If you've reached the amount that you want to put on, you can always take some off and have a little bit left over for future projects. And I'm going to take my next color, it's a slightly lighter blue, just overlap it slightly, because you want those colors to merge together. And it doesn't matter if it has sections where it's thicker or thinner, as long as it's fairly even over the whole painting. Next I'll take my lighter blue, just going to pull that out slightly, and then a bit more. Probably add a little bit more up here. We're going into my orange color. And then again, just pulling out a thin layer of those and overlapping the blue slightly. And next what I'm going to do is actually take my white fiber and I'm going to just cover the entire top section in this, because I like to just use a hint of the next colors over the painting. So it'll need a wool base to bind to. This is actually a Shetland silk blend, and you can see the shiny silk running through it. Wherever possible, if you can crisscross the fibers a little bit, it will help to mesh them together. Of course, you want to keep your bands quite nice, but wherever there's opportunity to cross those fibers over, it does wet felt a little bit quicker. So you can see it's just finely covering the pre-felt. You can still just about see through it, but I'll put another layer of my accent colors on top. So to start that off, I'm going to use this beautiful yellow blend. We make a lot of the blends ourselves, and it has lots of different fibers in it and colors, and so it brings a lot of textures to the wet felting paintings. And you can actually grab just a section of this and almost just swirl it out a little bit and separate the fibers for like a sunset type effect. Next I'm going to put a little bit of my pinks and purples. This has a bit of Angelina fiber in, which is a type of nylon. And then some pink. Two different purples. This is Shetland fiber. And this purple. And a bit of lilac. Perfect, and I'm gonna start my ocean colors. So I'm gonna take this very aquatic Mediterranean color and take a portion of that and ripple it underneath. Again, remembering to leave a little bit over the edge, so that just folds down nicely around the back. If you want to do it as a free standing kind of wall hanging, you can just tuck those edges in or under, or needle felt them or wet felt them. The orchid design I actually needle felt on top. That's one of the things that would be handy to have, the needle felting needle. Great, I'm going to work on, I have a mallard green color and just a hint of that all the way along. Starting to try and flatten this one so it's more of a horizontal line. And feel free to adjust the wool design. It's not set in stone until you start wet felting. And even then it'll probably move a little bit. Then again, your next color. And it doesn't take that much wool. You can see that I've got lots of different colors, but you don't need too much of them. And all of these are top fiber. So all combed, usually they are for spinning fibers, but they work really, really, really well for wet felting. Nice and smooth. And again, my next color, you can see just how many colors goes into making an ocean. And it's good to overlap them, so that way they blend really nicely into each other. And I'm going to show you in a minute how I make them blend even more. By taking some, this is actually like a silver gray color, and I find if I put a little bit of a hint of this over the work, it just binds them all together. And it's nice because the ocean often has a bit of a misty quality over it, and I find just adding a thin layer really helps blend it all together. And you're going to continue to your light teal color. Again, just putting that in the foreground. This is one of my favorite blends, this one that we do. It has actually camel and yak hair in it. And those are those beautiful browns. So I'm always really, really fond of using this one. Then as you get closer to the shoreline, I'm going to use some brown. This is like a hazelnut color. And then wherever possible, I'm just crisscrossing these fibers. It will help speed up the felting process. Making sure there aren't any really thin spots. So you want to make sure that it's got a good cover all over it and over the edge as well. Feel free to shuffle it with your fingers if you need to move anything. And then I'm just going to take some of my shiny green blend and put it along the shoreline. This has a lot of Tusha silk in it, which makes it just beautiful. And then this lovely purple, which has some flax blended into it. I'll ripple that through the painting. You can just pull out sections of it. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. And then I'm just going to get my accent fibers. So these are a collection of plant fibers, and I have some wool locks here. And I'm just going to put these along the shoreline. I'm going to put some of this soy fiber in the sky. And just separate and swirl it like it was sunshine in the clouds. It wet felt really beautifully. Again, more in the foreground. To think about where your orchids are going to be, so they'll have lots of splashing around them. Lower it just a little bit. Try and make that somewhat level. And then there's a little bit of pink. I'll put a little bit of this in the sky probably. And a little bit down here. And I have some nebs. I'll put a few of those just along the coast here. And again this side. And some green. And that will probably conclude laying out the painting. So now the painting is all laid out, we're ready to begin wet felting. I'm going to take some tulle. This is like just mesh netting. And I'm just going to lay it over the painting. And this just helps keep the wool down as you agitate the fibers. So in this one I have some pretty warm water. It's quite hot. The kettle boiled a little while ago. And I'm just going to pour it all over the painting. You can wear plastic gloves for this part if you would like to. I don't tend to unless I'm doing lots of wet felting. So you just pour it all over. I would have thought that a piece this size would be fine with just one of these, but it's usually one or two of these. Perfect. And then you're going to take your bar of soap and just rub over the surface. All over. I like to just smooth the fibers down using the soap, and that generally gives me plenty of soap to lather up. Looks like it's the perfect amount of water. So now that's all smoothed down, you can start rubbing the fiber. So you just want to smooth it out. Start to press those fibers into the felt backing. And then lighten up on how you're pressing, just lightly over the top. Create lovely circles with your arms. Nice and gentle. And I'll show you in a second that this has probably only just started to bind together. So this will need quite a bit more felting to happen before it's ready, because you can still pull at the wool. So you want to lay this back on and keep rubbing. And some people like to put a layer of bubble wrap over, and then you can roll it up and then just roll it back and forth. But for a painting this size, you have slightly more control if you're just rubbing it by hand. So you might need to put a little bit more water along the edges, just to wet those down as well. And a bit more soap, because as the wool absorbs the water, you might need to add a little bit more. And in our kits we always use soaps that are actually made in Alberta, and they are very environmentally aware and contain nothing harsh, so it's very safe to use. And I really enjoy working with them. They leave your hands nice and soft. So you're just going to keep working it. And it'd probably take about around half an hour to felt this, maybe slightly less, depending on how much you agitate the fiber. You want to be gentle, but press it quite firmly at the same time. It likes agitation over the top surface of the fiber. Every now and then you can check how your design is coming along. You can pull off the tool. You can see if the fiber looks like it's coming through the back, which is a sign of it actually felting. And just lay that back down again. Cover the tool over again. Continue rubbing. So this here is starting to felt really quite nicely. You can see the fibers are blending together pretty well. You can actually feel the difference when you're pressing across it. It'll have a bit of a fluffy, bouncy feel if you haven't felted it quite enough. You can just keep rubbing those areas. But here it feels more dense. And I know this hasn't been felted quite as much, so I'm going to put the tool back on and give it a bit of a rub. And I think we are almost there. At this point, if you wanted to have very, very straight wet felted edges, you can flip it over and fold all of these in and wet felt the back. But I equally like to do that with a felting needle afterwards. Or you can leave them loose. Equally, if it's being framed, then you won't see them. So any of those options. once it's been rubbed all over, you can then take it to the sink for a good rinse out. And that's where I will join you. So here we're at the sink, and I'm just gonna squeeze out all the water. And then you just want to run cold water and then hot water over it. And this just gets the fibers to relax and then tense up, which makes them felt together. And you're just rinsing all that soap out. Okay. So now we're going to fold the fabric, which is just throwing it onto your work surface, just to again shock those fibers into binding together. So you just toss it onto the table a few times. That should be plenty. And then we're just going to leave this to dry off. So now you've wet felted your painting. You're just going to let it dry. A lot of times it's best to put it onto a towel and then just leave it flat. But just like you would with any kind of knitting or crocheting, you just want to block it or at least pull it so that it's fairly even if you do intend to leave the edges natural. So you just want to just give it a little gentle tug, just because all of the fabric will have tightened a little bit as you're felting it. So you just want to try and stretch it so that it's nice and flat and the edges are nice and square. Equally, if you do have a bit that hasn't felted like you would like it to, so it's just come out a little bit more, you can just loop that onto the back, take your felting surface, and then poke through to hold that in place. So take your felting needle. The felting needle has little barbs just on the last part, little hooks, so as you poke into the wool, it will bind them together. And you just want to keep poking that. And you'll want to poke this way through from the front side to the back because it will put little fuzzy bits through, and so those will poke in reverse if you were to do it the other way around. So you just want to keep poking until that becomes nice and smooth. And again, this corner bit, you can just fold it underneath as well and just poke through that. Ideally, you would leave this to dry first before doing this though, because it will prefer that if it's dry. So I'm going to show you a little run through of how you would put the orcas on. This is still a bit wet, so I won't show you exactly how I put it onto this piece, but how I did the orcas is with needle felting, and you're just going to take a little bit of your carded black wool. So you know how with this one we used top where all the fibers were combed nice and smooth. These are all entangled, so they're already more intermingled, so felting is easier. So for the orca shape, in all of the kits there would be a template so you can actually follow along, but for this one I'd probably do them a little bit larger than I have on the Tea Cozy, but I just put them onto the painting in sort of a bit of a banana shape, and then again another one a little bit of a distance away. And it helps to be able to step back and take a look at where you're positioning them. But then I would put a needle felting surface underneath and then poke through until this is nice and smooth, and you can shape it as you're working, so you just tuck any of the fibers underneath And then after that, you would lay on top some of your white wool, again carded white wool, and place this where it says to in the design, or as you can see on the tea cozy. You just follow that along, and again a little bit of the fiber for any of the fins, and you can just fold it and sort of begin to felt it a little bit to put any of these in place. And you'll see it just pokes through the back and you get the little fuzzy texture on the back. And then I put some of the silky white underneath them to make them look like they're really coming out of the water. And again, you can use the needle just to tuck in the bottom, as I've done on this tea cozy. But as you're wet felting, you wet felt over the seam and it comes together pretty nicely. And that's all done with just wet felting. So when your painting is ready to be displayed, this is how you would do it with just a wooden pole. We've put a little hook on the back of a piece of dowel or wood, and then we've secured it by just putting a piece of thread through at regular intervals and then just tying them. And that hangs it beautifully. This is for a poppy painting that I did. And you just put a hook in the wall and hang it to it, and it drapes beautifully. So we have a painting with wool kit. We have wet felting kits. As I sort of described earlier, you have a selection of wool. It comes with the tulle netting, the pre-felt fabric, which is merino silk, all the different wool colors, and then again, your choice plant fibers like mint and soy. And again, it comes with a felting needle and a little foam or wool surface to poke through to complete the orca design. And in the kit has a template for the orcas that you can follow along more clearly. But I hope you enjoyed this video, learning to wet felt. Please do subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We would love to connect with you, and do check out our store at woollymeadowsfelting.com. Thank you so much.